From 2005 to 2016, the Rams were consistently one of the worst teams in the NFL, failing to reach the playoffs a single time during this period. Every year, they had a great draft pick, but just couldn't seem to land the difference makers needed to get them over the hump. So with a change in philosophy and an offensive genius running the show, the Rams decided to rely on free agency and trading their draft picks for proven veteran players who would instantly upgrade their roster, ultimately leading them to winning Super Bowl 56. Here is the timeline of how the Los Angeles Rams became Super Bowl champions. It all started in 2016 when the Rams decided to move back to Los Angeles and were looking to get away from their recent struggles in St. Louis. And just days before the 2016 NFL Draft, the Rams traded up to the number 1 overall pick, giving up a king's ransom in the process to draft their future franchise quarterback, Jared Goff. Going into the season, the Rams will be featured on HBO's Hard Knocks, where we got to see a behind-the-scenes look at the team and witness the development of Jared Goff firsthand. Shockingly though, Case Keenum would initially be named the starter and would do so until Week 11, when head coach Jeff Fisher decided to bench him in favor of Jared Goff. Fast forward to the end of the season, when the Rams had the worst scoring offense in the entire NFL, and decided enough was enough, finally firing longtime head coach Jeff Fisher, who had a terrible 31-45 record with the Rams in 5 seasons. The time was right, and the only bright spot of the entire 2016 season was that Aaron Donald had cemented himself as a force in the NFL, being named the first-team All-Pro for the second straight season. On January 12th of 2017, the Rams found their guy when they named the 30-year-old Washington Redskins offensive coordinator, Sean McVay, their new head coach. The Rams were so thrilled about hiring Sean McVay that they didn't even fulfill their interview that was still scheduled with Falcons offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan, who had been considered the favorite to land the job since Jeff Fisher was fired in late December. The 2017 offseason was a pivotal step for the Rams to rebuilding a roster that hadn't had a winning season since 2003. To start, they traded 2 players during free agency, sending defensive end William Hayes to the Dolphins and former number 2 overall pick Greg Robinson to the Lions, receiving a 6th-round pick in return for both players. During free agency, the LA Rams were big spenders, signing a combined $90 million in contracts, bolstering their offensive line, defensive backfield, and adding some weapons for their young franchise quarterback, Jared Goff. Going into the draft, the Rams still had quite a few positions of need that they didn't address during free agency. Wide receiver was one that stood out, even though they had just signed Robert Woods. They still needed to add at least 2 more to the roster, and they did just that when they drafted Cooper Kupp and Josh Reynolds in back-to-back rounds. Next up was safety, after the team let TJ McDonald walk in free agency. They filled his shoes instantly when they selected John Johnson III, 91st overall. During training camp, the Rams traded cornerback EJ Gaines and a 2018 second-round pick to the Buffalo Bills for wide receiver Sammy Watkins and a 2018 6th-round pick. At the time, Sammy Watkins was seen as a player who had not yet reached his full potential, as he had been dealing with nagging injuries so far in his career, and Sean McVay and the LA Rams were just hoping that he could stay healthy. Before the start of the 2017 season, experts were predicting an uptick in production from the Rams offense, due to the offensive prowess of new head coach Sean McVay. Almost all expectations for the team were centered around how the development of Jared Goff went in year 2. Ultimately, the Rams finished the regular season 11-5, winning their division by 2 games and making the playoffs for the first time since 2004. In the playoffs, the Rams would face off against the Atlanta Falcons in the wildcard round, as the Falcons were looking to get back to the Super Bowl to avenge their 25-point collapse against the New England Patriots the year prior. Unfortunately for the Rams, they would go on to lose 13-26, starting their offseason early, this time with a little momentum and motivation. Coming off of a tough loss in the playoffs, Sean McVay and the LA Rams had one thing in mind for the offseason, and that was to get better by any means necessary. They started the offseason with a bang, increasing their trade total for the last 12 months to 10, with the additions of Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, and Brandon Cooks. They also departed from players like Tavon Austin, Robert Quinn, and Alec Ogletree, who were key contributors in the team making the playoffs. During free agency, the Rams decided to make a splash by pairing defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald, creating one of the scariest defensive lines of all time. The 2018 NFL Draft was the year the Rams decided to change their drafting philosophy, switching to a best player available approach since they didn't have any glaring needs that they thought could be filled by later round rookies, who usually need a year or two of development. At the start of the 2018 season, the Rams were almost unanimously expected to take another massive leap to become one of the best teams in the NFL. The strength of their team was in the trenches, with their dominant defensive line stopping the run and their offensive line allowing Todd Gurley to absolutely dominate. The Rams started the season on a tear, winning 8 straight games and scoring 30 or more points in 6 of them. And on the 30th of October, the Rams decided they needed a boost in the pass rushing department and decided to make yet another trade. This time with the Jacksonville Jaguars for Dante Fowler Jr., giving up a 3rd and a 5th round pick. The Rams closed out the 2018 regular season by going 5-3 over the last 9 weeks, finishing the season 13-3, winning their division again and marching their way into the playoffs as the number 2 seed in the NFC. On the 2nd anniversary of his hiring as the LA Rams head coach, Sean McVay won his first career playoff game when the Rams dominated both sides of the line of scrimmage to defeat the Dallas Cowboys and advance to the NFC Championship for the 10th time in franchise history. In the conference championship the following week, the Rams would outlast the Saints in a nail-biting overtime game that was decided by a game-winning field goal to advance to Super Bowl 53. In arguably the most boring Super Bowl of all time, the Rams were completely outmatched by Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, losing 3-13. This was a tough loss for the Rams, who were an absolutely dominant team all season as the number 1 offense in the entire NFL. After reaching the Super Bowl in just their 2nd season under head coach Sean McVay, the Rams front office was all in and were willing to do whatever was necessary to get back there. So much so that when free agency came around, they let many of their players walk in order to maintain cap flexibility, which led them to sign veteran safety Eric Weddle from the Ravens. And at the time, this transaction was seen as one of the best of the entire free agency period, as he was an instinctive player who would make the entire back half of the Rams defense better next season. After free agency, the Rams had a tremendous need for interior offensive linemen and cornerbacks, but for some reason, they decided not to address those needs in the draft, utilizing the best player available approach instead. To start the 2019 season, the Rams dealt with some adversity, as for the first time under Sean McVay, the Rams had a losing record after 6 games, mainly due to injuries and the lack of depth to replace those players after years of trading draft picks and solid depth players. So what did the Rams do? They made a trade. And on October 15th, 2019, the Rams decided enough was enough and called up the Cleveland Browns in order to bolster their interior offensive line by trading for former 2nd round pick Austin Corbett, who was immediately inserted into the starting lineup at left guard. Later that day, the Rams decided to trade Marcus Peters to the Baltimore Ravens, who were having a magical season with Lamar Jackson taking the lead by storm. But the real story was how everyone was confused on why the Rams would trade away the ball-hawking Peters, who was having a historic season in terms of interceptions. And while everyone was wondering why the Rams traded Marcus Peters for a ham sandwich, Adam Schefter hit us with this, an absolute stunner to the NFL world. But this wasn't the end. A week later, the Rams decided it was time to cut ties with another cornerback. This time, it was the agent Aqib Talib, who was well past his prime and was seen as a cap casualty. Besides, the Rams needed to pay Jalen Ramsey anyway. Fast forward to the end of the season, when the Rams failed to make the playoffs and were beginning to lose faith in their offensive stars. Would Todd Gurley ever bounce back from his longtime knee ailment? Is Jared Goff good enough to be the quarterback to take us back to the Super Bowl? These were the questions the Rams faced going into the 2020 offseason. After a season where the Rams failed to reach the playoffs for the first time under Sean McVay, the Rams knew they needed to make some changes, and quickly. So the first order of business was trading Brandon Cooks to the Houston Texans, a player who was no longer needed due to the ascension of a young Cooper Kupp. In free agency, the Rams worked to bolster their defensive line by providing defensive tackle Aaron Donald with some much-needed help in defending the run. After releasing Todd Gurley, the Rams had a huge hole at the running back position, and they needed an immediate replacement, and Cam Akers somehow fell right into their laps in the second round. They also added players like Jordan Fuller and Van Jefferson, who were seen as some of the best value picks of the entire draft. Shockingly, the 2020 season was all about defense for the Rams, as they harassed opposing quarterbacks with a plethora of pass rushers. But one thing that seemed to plague them all season was the horrendous play from quarterback Jared Goff, who was suffering through a thumb injury and had become an extremely inconsistent quarterback due to not being able to grip the ball properly. This created some conflict between the team and Jared Goff because they wanted to bench him, but Goff insisted on playing through it. Due to the stellar play of the defense for the Rams, they still managed to make the playoffs, earning a wild card berth and a trip to Seattle to face off against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. A dominant performance by the NFL's #1 ranked defense and a breakout performance by rookie running back Cam Akers, the Rams were able to upset the #3 seeded Seahawks and advance to the divisional round. Unfortunately, they had to travel to Green Bay to face the top-seeded Packers, who played mistake-free football and turned the rated Rams to advance to the NFC Championship game, controlling the line of scrimmage all game against the top-ranked Rams defense. Almost immediately after the season ended, the LA Rams pulled off another blockbuster trade when they decided to send former #1 overall pick Jared Goff to the Detroit Lions for Matthew Stafford, a quarterback who had been suffering in Detroit his entire career. With a new quarterback, the Rams went into the offseason feeling on top of the world. Now with a proven quarterback, Sean McVay felt like he could completely open up his playbook and allow his receivers to use their full abilities to get open downfield, which was Stafford's specialty. At this point, the Rams had become known for trading players for late-round picks, and this offseason was no different when they sent longtime defensive end Michael Brockers to the Detroit Lions right along with Jared Goff. It was kind of funny because Michael Brockers was talking smack about Jared when he was traded. In the 2021 NFL Draft, the Rams made a lot of head-scratching selections, drafting players well above their expected rounds and even taking players most teams wouldn't have even drafted. Going into the 2021 season, the Los Angeles Rams were seen as the team to beat, returning all but 2 defensive starters and upgrading at the quarterback position, allowing the offensive mind of Sean McVay to run at his peak performance. And on October 25th, the Rams decided to make another trade, sending Kenny Young for yet another late-round pick. But what would happen just a week later really changed the game. On November 1st, 2021, the Denver Broncos decided to trade future Hall of Famer Von Miller to the LA Rams for a second-round pick. This was a huge addition to the Rams defense as it created a dangerous pairing of Aaron Donald and Von Miller. But the Rams didn't stop there, and after being released by the Cleveland Browns a week prior, on November 12, 2021, Odell Beckham Jr. decided to sign a 1-year deal with the LA Rams. At this point, the LA Rams had officially assembled a super team and were seen as the favorites to win the Super Bowl. By the end of the season, the Rams were just creating chemistry with their new additions for the playoffs. Odell Beckham and Von Miller were fitting in nicely and had begun to insert themselves as vocal leaders. To kick off the 2021 playoffs, the Rams hosted the first ever playoff game on Monday Night Football. In this wildcard game, the Rams thoroughly dominated their NFC West rival, the Arizona Cardinals, in the first ever postseason game held at SoFi Stadium. Next up was the divisional round against the defending Super Bowl champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In this game, the Rams got off to an early, but it seems as though they became satisfied and had allowed the Buccaneers to storm back, having to kick a game-winning field goal to advance to the conference championship. The Rams came out sluggish, making tons of mistakes to start off this game against the 49ers, allowing them to score 17 straight points without answering. But a late game rally allowed them to take the lead and advance to Super Bowl 56. The Rams had finally got their opportunity to avenge Super Bowl 53, and with all eyes on them, they didn't disappoint. It was a hard-fought game against the Cincinnati Bengals, who weren't going away easy, But in the fourth quarter, it was the Cooper Kupp show after OBJ was officially ruled out of the game. The Rams won the Super Bowl 23-20 and had finally became world champions. Up until this point in NFL history, most Super Bowl teams were built through the draft, and many teams felt it was impossible to do it any other way. But the Rams proved to the rest of the league that it is possible, leading us to question, who's next?